From Utah, Mr. Chaffetz is recognized.
I thank the chairman, and with full disclosure, being the representative from Utah, asking a question of the senator from Utah, it should be fully disclosed that I'm frequently called upon to give rides to the senator, and whenever he asks for such ride, I duly comply and drive him from place to place. With that said, I'll ask the hardball question here. If the senator would, recess appointments can be overused, abused. Doesn't matter if Republican or Democrat. I think we want to help change that system. Can you offer your perspective on that?
Certainly, and I want to make clear that there is reciprocity in the ride arrangement. I was once referred to as the chauffeur to the chief of staff to the governor of Utah when I would drive.
Then I lost rank, and now I'm back driving my own car. But nevertheless, we'll dispute that later.
At the time he had a broken foot, he had to ride in the back seat with his foot elevated, so I literally looked like the chauffeur. I wanted to buy a chauffeur's hat. Recess appointments. So what we have to consider with recess appointments is the fact that the president does have to get Senate confirmation for executive branch and judicial nominees. There is an exception for that, and several members of the committee have correctly pointed out. Presidents of both parties have throughout time utilized the recess appointment power. But that's not really what we're talking about here. This is not a garden variety exercise of the recess appointment power. Because the recess appointment power has to be exercised, as outlined in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution, when the Senate is in recess. So it begs the question, when is the Senate in recess? Well, Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2 gives each House of Congress the power to establish its own rules. It goes further in Article 1. Article 1, Section 5, Clause 4 says that before either House of Congress may adjourn for a period of more than 3 days, it has to get the permission of the other House of Congress. So in this instance, January 4, 2012, the Senate had not, according to its own rules, been adjourned for more than 3 days. Historically, that has been regarded as at least an important touchstone for deciding whether or not the Senate's in recess. The Senate's never been deemed, for purposes of the recess appointment power, to be in recess during an adjournment of less than 3 days. And so we didn't have the House's permission to adjourn for more than 3 days. And by our own rules, we had been in session about 24 hours earlier. So that's why we've got a problem here. That's what makes this incident different from every other exercise of that power.
And then this second part that I want to talk about, it seems to me, Chairman, that executive privilege has not been articulated with specificity so that we know what it is, when it should be used, when it could be used. Is it overused? I think this is a concern from the legislative branch in general. It can be, I find it, particularly in the case of Fast and Furious, to be overly used. So such a blanket, oh, well, we're just going to invoke executive privilege. Is that something that we should, and Chairman, what I'm interested in is perhaps pursuing legislation that would clarify and codify exactly what executive privilege is and what it is not, where it would apply and where it would not. Senator Lee, and then other members, other members of this panel, if you care to respond, that'd be great.
Yeah, I do have a response to that. As we discussed briefly earlier, there are two varieties, two flavors, if you will, of executive privilege here. We've got the deliberative process privilege, but the deliberative process privilege, according to the D.C. Circuit's own standard, that's fairly well understood, does not apply here where we have reason to believe that government misconduct is involved. Here, the government misconduct could be said to exist in the administration's claim that misleading Congress in a letter delivered on February 11, 2011, asserting that the administration did not, in fact, allow gun walking. And so that privilege doesn't really apply here. So the other flavor of the privilege is the presidential communications privilege. But in order to get into the realm of that privilege, you've got to have someone involved in the decision-making process who had what we call operational proximity to the president or the president's immediate advisors, or some combination of the two. The claim that we had from the beginning, as I understood it, was that there was not a lot of involvement by the president and his closest advisors, or any involvement. So one of two things has to be true then, if the executive privilege can be properly invoked here. Either the president and or his very close advisors were directly involved, or this privilege may not be invoked.